What if I told you two little girls once convinced the entire world that fairies were real, fooling scientists, celebrities, and even the creator of Sherlock Holmes? A handful of photographs, a wild imagination, and suddenly the world was seeing magic in a quaint English village. Hello humans, I am the Black Cat and welcome to Weird Wednesday. For today's mystery, we must travel back to 1917 in a village called Cottingley in West Yorkshire. Before we get to the story, let me ask you a question. Have you ever told a so-called white lie in order to get out of something, only to have that little lie snowball into a serious mess? Now, imagine your little innocent lie went worldwide and garnered media attention. Other people's lives and professions were put in danger because of it, and everyone is asking you to explain something that never happened. Something you never intended to go further than your own home. How would you feel? You're probably thinking, well, it's better to tell the truth. Sure, a logical adult would think so. But what if you were a child? A child who made up a story and suddenly everyone's asking you questions. I imagine it would be rather scary. A child would normally worry about getting in trouble with their parents for lying, but what if you get in trouble with the whole country? I think you would think it's safer to keep quiet and just continue with the lie. Well, that thought leads us to today's story. A story of a little white lie that grew out of control. And that's the story of the Cottingley Fairy Photos. In 1916, Frances, then aged 8, moved from South Africa to England to stay with Frances's auntie Polly and Uncle Arthur. Arthur and Polly had a 15-year-old daughter named Elsie. Frances and Elsie soon became close friends and would play in the woods at the back of their house. In those woods was a small stream known locally as a beck. The girls would often play in the stream, returning home with wet shoes and sometimes wet clothes. Polly would naturally scold them for getting their shoes wet. One day, Frances and Elsie returned home from playing, and again, their shoes were wet and dirty. And again, Polly scolded them, but Elsie, trying to get out of being in trouble, told her mother that they were wet because they were playing with fairies in the stream. Polly believed in fairies. Could that be why Elsie chose fairies as an excuse? Whatever the reason, the girls were insistent, and they said they could prove it. At the time, Arthur had taken up photography as a hobby and had a darkroom set up in the house, so Elsie took his camera and promised to get proof. The cousins set off with the camera and a short time later returned with their evidence. Arthur developed the photo, and to their surprise, what appeared was a photo of Frances looking at the camera as 4 fairies danced in front of her. Arthur, knowing the girls were creative, figured the fairies were cardboard cutouts, put the photo aside, and didn't think much more of it. A couple of months later, Elsie again asked to borrow the camera. The girls went off to the stream and returned with another photo for Arthur to develop. This time, it showed Elsie sitting on the grass with what appeared to be a gnome. Polly, however, believed the photos were genuine, as she already believed that fairies were real. Arthur, though, wasn't buying and refused to lend the camera to them again. The photos were put away and not much thought was given to them for a few years. In 1918, about 2 years later, Polly attended a lecture from the Theosophical Society, a group interested in different religions, science, philosophies, and the unknown natural world. The lecture that Polly attended just happened to be on fairy life. At the end of the lecture, Polly approached the speaker and showed them the photos. They were so impressed that they displayed them at their annual conference, exposing the photos to a much larger audience. The photos soon caught the attention of Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, best known for creating Sherlock Holmes. He also had a strong interest in spirituality and the spiritualism movement of the late 1800s and early 1900s. The images captured by the two girls intrigued him. He managed to get hold of the negatives and had them analysed. He sent the negatives to 2 different experts, Kodak and Harold Snelling, a well-known photographer of the time. Both experts came to similar conclusions. The negatives themselves had not been tampered with. However, Kodak noted that the photos could easily be replicated and did not believe the subjects in the photos were genuine. Sir Arthur, for whatever reason, decided to ignore that part of the feedback and focused on the fact that the negatives weren't fake, because, after all, why would they lie? Harold Snelling also agreed with Doyle, adopting the opinion that the girls wouldn't make something like this up. Doyle gifted the girls 2 new cameras, hoping they could capture more fairy photos. Frances and Elsie went on to take 3 more images, but not everyone in the world of spiritualism was so quick to believe. Harry Houdini, the famed illusionist and escape artist, had long been a vocal skeptic of spiritualist claims. Contrary to the movie, however, he wasn't directly involved in the Cottingley case, but he had publicly clashed with Doyle over similar topics. Houdini believed many supernatural events were were clever trickery, and his opposing views eventually ended their friendship. The Cottingley Photos became yet another point of tension in the growing divide between believers and skeptics. In 1922, Doyle published a book titled The Coming of the Fairies, a collection of fairy sightings from around the world. The Cottingley Fairy Photos were heavily featured and even appeared on the cover. With Doyle's endorsement, the story exploded. More and more people wanted to meet the girls and visit the stream where the photos had been taken. Soon, hordes of people were scouring the area, hoping to glimpse the mystical creatures. Sir Arthur wasn't the only celebrity intrigued by the story. Other spiritualists, artists, and curious intellectuals weighed in. Author Margaret McKillen and painter Estella Kenzina expressed fascination. Some praised the photos as long-awaited validation of the supernatural. Others were skeptical, but hesitant to challenge a belief endorsed by Doyle. And of course, the press loved it. Newspapers ran the story with whimsical headlines, treating it like a real-life fairy tale, unfolding in their readers' backyards. But behind the scenes, Francis and Elsie were growing increasingly uncomfortable. What started as a playful excuse had now turned into an international sensation. They weren't sure how to get out of it, and at this point, the truth seemed too dangerous to tell, so they kept their secret. The media storm eventually calmed down, and over the years, the Cottingley Photos became more of a charming historical curiosity than a widely believed phenomenon. Still, the question lingered, were the fairies real? It wasn't until the 1980s, over 60 years later, that the truth finally came out. In an interview, the cousins admitted that the photos were indeed faked. The fairies were copied from a popular children's book of the time and propped up with hat pins. Elsie, who had artistic talent, had drawn and cut out the figures herself. Frances, however, maintained that while most of the photos were staged, she genuinely remembered seeing fairies that day at the stream. She believed at least one of the photographs captured something real. Whether it was wishful thinking or something stranger, we'll never truly know. And maybe, just maybe, the real mystery isn't whether the fairies were real. Maybe the mystery is why so many people wanted them to be. We'll never know for sure what danced by that stream in Cottingley, but for a while, two little girls made the whole world believe. And isn't that, in its own way, magic? But anyway, that's all the time I have for this mystery. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and I'll catch you later.